Good evening to you viewers and listeners, and welcome to the April 24th edition of Beyond the Headlines. Thank you very much wherever you are, in your living rooms, tuned in on GBN television, in one of the local salons, listening in on GBN radio, or via any of our social media platforms. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's going to be an interesting program, an exciting program, one that is near and dear to my heart. We're talking trade unionism, really, and representing workers in the 21st century. That's the theme of this evening's discussion. And with us in studio, we have Senator Andre Lewis, who is the president of the Grenadiers Trade Union Council and the newly reminted president of the Public Workers Union, Mr. Brian Grimes. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we are on the eve of May Day, and typically when we see May Day, I notice that Senator Lewis is in his red T-shirt, seemingly ready for battle. But generally, when we speak of trade unions and the approach of May Day, you know, we look at being very not only assertive, but sometimes it's been called aggressive. But let us just track back before we look forward. And just share with us what conditions provoked the formation of the trade union movement.
Okay, well, let me say good night to the listener and viewing public, and good night to you, Brother Dowe. And I smile and you smile and I say Brother Dowe, but I'm referring to Brother Colin Dowe. And my mind immediately go back to Comrade Brother Reginald Dowe, your dad.
Correct.
And I wish to place on record our profound solidarity and appreciation for all that he did to bring the labor movement in Grenada and the working class people of Grenada for where we are today. You must know of the contributions that he made in the formation of the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union in his early days in Grenlec. And interestingly enough, as you ask about the conditions that gave rise to the labor movement globally, it is similar conditions that gave rise to the formation of unions in Grenada and the Technical and Allied Workers Union, of which your dad played a very important role. Because certainly in 1958, the formation of Dowe, and leading up to 1958, the workers of Grenlec, the electricity company, which is today Grenlec, and like Water Commission and Telephone Company and others, didn't have the form of trade union representation that the agricultural workers had under the late Sir Eric Matthew. And therefore they felt as though they were being left out to address their issues, and that led to the formation of Dowe. I just thought I should have branched off there, because it is people like him that we owe our progress to for the role that he has played, and I wish to salute his contribution and many more like him. Having said that, the conditions such as low wages, long hours of work, understanding our history coming out of the slavery period, the Industrial Revolution, where conditions were very tough, where the aspect that guides today looking at the employers or the owners, looking to see how much they can get out of labor and paying a minimal rate for it so that they can maximize their profit. In a way, Brother Dowe, one, many times on reflection and reviewing our history and looking at the comments of many of our founding fathers internationally and locally, sometimes you wonder if the conditions have changed. Yes, it have changed in a number of ways. The gadgets that we have, right? Technology have changed. But the yearning for progress and that constant contradictions in workers trying to get more of the pie, of that wealth that they create, recognizing that it is labor that creates wealth. It is labor that changes the value of the inputs. You can have capital, you can have land, right? You can have assets, but unless labor goes into it, it basically does not change. And with the ever demands for wanting a better living condition, many times it's not just about pay, but require pay in order to be able to purchase those things that we require. So the living conditions, the low wages, long hours of work, and the organized, cohesive approach of the state and the owners of capital lend itself to workers recognizing the need for them to come together.
Let's bring Brian in at this point. Brian, has this changed? All of the challenges, as Andre would have mentioned.
Yes, obviously the fluxion of time would sort of mandate that based on the years going forward, that there would be slight changes, there would be slight improvements. But at the crux of it, at the central part of it, as Comrade Lewis was speaking about, the whole dynamic between labor and capital, it remains the same across the world, and I dare say in Grenada, Carriacou, and PD Martinique. So we see the same thing here. As president of the Grenada Public Workers Union, I identify with the struggles of the past, the struggles of the present. They are very, very similar. People are working in conditions currently in the 21st century. For example, on agricultural estates, that you wonder if they are stuck in a time chamber. In terms of their salaries, very minuscule salaries, similar to what we spoke about earlier with the advent of Sir Eric Gairy as a trade unionist in this country, what spurred him to become that national figure. Some of the things still exist within our country. We talk about working conditions. We are in the public service. Many of our workers are working in environments that are really not conducive for human labor, right? So this exists. However, it's not all bad, Mr. Dowe. It's not all bad at all. There have been improvements. Recently, we have seen, based on the struggle of labor, based on the solidarity of unions coming together, and we utilizing the judiciary, the court system, we have seen the restoration of pension. So we call it a struggle. So there are things that still exist, but we keep the struggle on, and this is what May Day represents.
Okay. Let me just ask you here, Andre, and this probably may be a counterintuitive question, but how has unions benefited employers?
Certainly, we have significantly benefited employers by having workers organized. Could you imagine in a workplace, and I'm using Grenada, a workplace with, let us say, okay, there is a private sector workplace that have as much as 700 workers in Grenada, the second largest employer, SGU. The government of Grenada is the largest employer. Could you imagine that employer having to deal with 700 employees on different matters? The fact that they're able to be organized, and as a representative of the workers, you can approach management, the employers, and sit to discuss matters of mutual concern through collective bargaining. Unions have also impacted employers positively by encouraging our workers to be disciplined, punctuality, the whole aspect of encouraging productivity, which is a central matter at some stage we must discuss in this country. Because I am sure that your training has taught you where the responsibility for productivity lies. And that is why few people have been able to go and study and get different degrees in management. Because management is a tool of getting productivity, but we have to work collectively together. So the unions have been able to assist with worker discipline, assist in having a centralized body to address the general conditions. As I indicated, had it been that every Monday morning a worker has to go before management to complain or to address an issue or the different conditions. So in a collective agreement, the terms and condition of employment, which contains management rights, employees' rights, union rights, it is all codified in this document. So we are able, the management, employers, and the unions and the workers, to be able to address matters more in a centralized sort of area. We have been able to use our training to give advice on different ways and means of increasing production, different ways and means of technology, what should be looked into, motivation, motivating staff, and engaging management in those sort of discussions, whereby in most of our collective agreement, there is an article that we have that we call joint consultation, where quarterly or twice a year, management and the unions will meet to discuss matters of punctuality, productivity, general matters before they reach matters for disciplinary purposes. Okay. So we have been able to help focus that discussion. But if you will just permit me, I must also say, based on the earlier question that you asked, that a lot of benefits have come a long way. Health insurance, pension.
Well, that's where I want to go with Brian.
Okay, sure.
And just speak to how unions have benefited employees now, which is the question that you'd expect.
Come along.
Yeah, of course we have come a long way. A lot of people, particularly young people, right? They look at unions as an institution, as an organization that is not purposeful in our society, and that is so far from the truth. Things that we take for granted in this society, for example, a 40-hour work week or 8-hour work day, the ability to, take holidays and still get paid, for women to have maternity leave. A lot of the time, just not too long ago, in the period of, let's say, Sir Eric Gairy, if a woman became impregnated, there was a high chance that she could lose her job. Maurice Bishop and the revolution changed that to true trade union principles, right? There are a lot of things that have happened over the period of time that one can appreciate. We spoke about health insurance. We spoke about pension. Workers after the productive seasons having the capacity to have a social security and move on and be able to live comfortably. Weekends. Just having a weekend, we take that for granted. Unions have fought for this over the years. And we are not just an institution or an organization that simply we fight for wages or whatever it is. Our organization, our movement fights and struggles and trust goes forward with the intention to empower our membership, educate our membership, inform our membership. Well, so it's not always about begging the government for this or that.
Well, let me start challenging, because I know that you're addressing those because you understand that is the perception.
Yes.
But you mentioned the youth, and you also mentioned that the youth, and 60% of our Grenada's population is below age 30.
Yes.
That's reality. And you declared, and I agree, that the youth quite often don't believe that unions are purposeful. Gentlemen, any one of you want to go? What has been your deliberate strategy to engage our youthful population on the benefits of the trade union movement?
Yeah. So for instance, in the recent past, and I'll just deal with the recent past, in the last, certainly as a matter of fact, I recall that in March of 2020, we had just about to wrap up a 3 or 4 day training seminar led by CPNE College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, where the leadership of the unions, trade union activists, and a large percentage of youth were involved in trade union history, trade union education, dealing with communication, the need to use the modern technology to communicate with our members. And that has all been part of trying to pass on those knowledge and information. And yes, there's a lot more to be done, because the challenges keep changing. And as the nature of work changes, this becomes more and more challenging. And
therein lies the challenge in the union's struggle to remain relevant. And again, I will ask, in terms of your deliberate strategy to assist young people, what can you give examples of any negotiations, collective bargaining agreement, where there have been a deliberate strategy recognizing that a significant proportion of your membership would be young, whether it's benefits in education, for example, and the ability to train retain and maintain their jobs? I'm just throwing something out here.
Sure.
Do we have that type of discussions, recognizing the youthful population that is employed?
Yes, we have, and we have to do more of that, because part of the challenge that we have is that we also have an age employer force, right? And we must not lose sight of that. So, for instance, a number of our proposals, many times what you see in a collective agreement is not that which has been proposed, because we see an investment in education as an investment, obviously. We see the need for training and retraining, because to address the issue of productivity and production, the question of training and retraining must come into play. The use of modern tools, the use of modern communication. So we have sought to, and in some collective in there, what one will call the progressive collective agreements of workplaces. We have been able to get things as study leave, and the study leave are linked to work that forms part of the nature of the activities of the employment that one is involved in.
Right.
And obviously there's a process and a procedure. So once it has been identified, you ought to check the management, be the HR. You agree that this will enhance my job function. You show the relevant official communications and acceptance from the school or the learning institution, and we seek to get provisions made to allow people to study. Obviously, there comes with a responsibility as to whether or not one should be bonded, right? Should one, what one should be doing during the dung study time in terms of when the institution is closed, right? So all of these things, a lot more needs to be done.
Is there a cost-sharing mechanism? In other words, is the employer being asked to make the full investment, or is it a cost-sharing between the beneficiary, meaning the worker, and the establishment? Because beyond the bonded period, that investment in the individual remains. So the employer gives job experience.
Sure.
The employer pays for training. The bonding can be a maximum probably of 3 years. And then that individual can leave and ply that trade elsewhere. So is there a cost sharing that the investment is shared, employer, employee? Has that been modeled?
In some instances, yes.
Okay.
And most of the instances, there is a reimbursement. In some of the instances, it is a proportion. It might be 50% up to a maximum of X or Y. But therein lies the issue. We are making this request as part of the collaborative effort in our small geographic space. And given the challenges that we have with employment, to encourage companies to make the work challenging. In other words, so you know that this is a pathway to move from A to B. The question of job evaluation, how do one move from point A to point B? And after your return, what are the challenges to make the work interesting for you to remain? Right? So it is that collective discussion that required. But yes, it is a multifaceted instances. There are instances where the cost is not shared, meaning that the employee carries the whole cost, but the job is held for them. Yes. Right. In that case, they return and people do their job. Or there is the aspect that you go out, you come back, you do some work, and then you go again. So it requires that sort of dialogue with the principle of investing in the individual, not just from the company's coffer, but from the employee demonstrating the interest. Is that we need to see more of that. Yeah, the unions have been crying out for more of this, right? These are things that is outside of what you call just a basic pay increases. Right? You know, these are just investment in the human capital. Okay. Right?
And Brian, likewise, for a young person, there'll be lots of talk about contract workers. Certainly within the financial sector, you have peak time, part-time, peak, and you know, all sorts of permutations of employment, rather than full-time permanent employment. And as we know, if you don't have that full-time permanent engagement, it's difficult to go to a lender in order to build. What type of agitation have you made on behalf of employees to secure their employment so that they can look towards taking on mortgages so they can acquire land and assets and that type of growth in wealth for the type of work they've been putting on?
Well, yes, as part of my journey within the trade union movement, contract work has been a constant, something very, very constant in terms of our focus and in terms of my focus as a trade unionist. And the reason is I understand how it can decimate the spirit of a worker. And I'm speaking from within the public service. Your question is general, but I will, hone in on the public service. And I know this personally because I worked in the public service. Well, this is my 23rd year, but for 9 years, I guess you know me as a customs officer.
Well, let me tell you something. The 23 years, I was a little bit hesitant to admit that I know you. Yes, but I do recall when you came in to
yes,
customs.
But for 9 years, I was signing customs documents. I was, working hard, being very diligent because I love my job, as a public officer, as a customs officer, and it took me 9 years to actually don the uniform, right? And within that period, I did a lot of work. I gave customer service, but I understood what it felt like to see others upgraded, to see people, you work side by side with people doing the same job, right? The same job, and they have better benefits than you. And this is where one of the quintessential things that we fight for is equity. Now, the contract work syndrome, because I experience it and I know how disheartening it can be, when I entered the trade union movement, I took that mantle up and I ran with it. So currently in this dispensation, you would see the National Democratic Congress administration, they campaign on what we call regularization. Because within the public service, there are a lot of people who are temporary, who are working on contract, double-figure years, Colin. Yeah, and they are just disenchanted. They're doing the work, but like you said, in terms of economic upliftment, going to the bank with confidence to get loans of substance, like mortgages, not just small things, not just a skettle or whatever it is. We're talking about house and land. They are prevented from doing so besides, despite the fact that they are highly skilled, they are good at what they do. And because of that, you hear a lot of people now talking about, well, the productivity is low. If you're not paid well, what do you expect? Do you expect to get the most out of the worker? Do you expect the morale of the public service or the workspace to be high if the compensation and the remuneration packages are not what it should be, if job security is not what it should be? And we spoke about the fact that we have a very young population that is synonymous with a young workforce, right? And if you're given this type of unsecured tenure to workers, to young workers, you're not empowering them and you're not setting that ingredient to foster productivity in Grenada, Carriacou, and PD Martinique. So while contract work by itself, standing on its own, cannot be seen as something illegal, the abuse and overuse of it has really, really hurt, I would say, the public service and overall productivity, despite the fact that some people love their job, they're doing what they have to do, but I think parties, meaning employer and employee, have to meet on the half. And where we start is by giving job security to our workers. The administration says that they're up for the task. I know once that is done, you will see more, increased morale, increased productivity, a better public service, and by extension, a better Grenada.
Okay. Andre, almost half, if not a little bit more than half of the workforce in Grenada is women. Share with us some of the things, again, deliberate strategies to empower women and to ensure equality or at least equity in the workplace.
Okay, great. Because part of the struggle of the labor movement is to bring equity not just among the working class, but among the members themselves. And therefore, most organizations, most unions have women committees, have quite a number of our shop shows. If you visit our general council meetings, quite a number of our shop shows are women. If you recall, in 2021, the struggle of the RBTT, now ACB, RBC workers, about 95% of them were women. And a lot of this has to do with our deliberate engagement in terms of motivating workers, our international connections, in most instances has taken what you call affirmative action by insisting or encouraging that quite a number of the activities that one comes involved in, regionally and internationally, a percentage is made up of women and youth.
Let me cut you here, because I'm not speaking of tokenism. I'm not saying that when you do a head count, if the majority are women, then probably if you do a head count, the majority will be women. I'm speaking of the empowerment of women, the recognition that there are challenges that may be unique to a female worker in the workplace, and what has been the union's deliberate strategy to ensure equity.
Yes. So we have the question of uncertified sick leave, and the question of the same maternity leave. Part of that because it came out of the women, the workers' struggle. The aspect of having our women involved in training. The aspect of, so for instance, as a practical example, only today we're involved in a discussion with some of our colleagues out of Jamaica having to do with domestic workers. And we understand and appreciate that the largest percentage of domestic workers are women, trying to get them organized to do with the aspect of being paid properly, trying to do with the aspect of working hours. I'm trying to do. But
I'll deliberately cut you here, and forgive me because you went on a pet peeve of mine, and I'm calling it a peeve because this is what I've done. Can we legitimately call the unions in operations today trade unions? And this is what I'm going to propose. An establishment comes into effect. When they become successful, a trade union jumps in, or a union jumps in. I will call them a company union. Unlike the fact where our store clerks in town, our domestic workers who are traversing, walking to Lansapine, etc., to take up their daily responsibilities. The gas station attendants, they seem not to have any representation. I'm happy to hear that you say Jamaica is attempting to organize the domestic workforce. Will we see that type of movement here?
Yes, that's what I indicated to you. We are engaged with our colleagues from Jamaica, but Jamaica, Antigua, and Barbados have organized domestic workers associations and unions, and we are looking to spread it. Understanding that the traditional workplaces have a larger concentration of workers, and they will seek and will also seek to do the representation. So yes, the task now is for us to broaden that representation. And here the aspect of the discussion on the minimum wage comes into play. Here the discussion on the labor code, because the labor code didn't just fall from the sky, but recognizing that there will be challenges in some of the workplaces to bring numbers together, because the union has a lot to do with solidarity. And in workplaces where there are some of the workplaces that you call, once it is known that a worker is interested in joining their union, he's been fired. Well,
we'll get to that. I know I have to take a break.
Yes. So I want us to come back to that.
Yes, we definitely will. Viewers, it's time for us to take our first break. We'll be right back.
A home should always be safe for you and your children. So remember to have your electrician check your wiring every 5 years and keep cords and wires out of the reach of children.
We even added circuit interrupters in the bathroom and kitchen and any place where water and electricity are close.
Remember, children, never touch electrical cords and wires and never put objects into sockets.
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Have you heard about the new soft weave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Soft Weave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue, available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Soft Weave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
But when you need someone to help you to your feet, I'll be that beacon to your highest peak. Oh, I'll be right next to you, no, I will never leave. Come on, take my hands, we got everything we need. Cause you can look to me whenever you're in need. Just call on me and I'll be on my way. I'll be by your side, never to divide. The light that shines our way. Wherever you ride, we'll be right there with you. Wherever you ride, we'll make your dreams come true. Next time, next time, next time, next to you.
Nexa Credit Union, with you wherever your road leads.
When a loved one passes on, we all need the comfort, support, and guidance of a trusted friend. You can rely on LaCour Brothers Funeral Home. We provide a personalized professional service that exceeds all expectations. Our dedicated staff responds to your every need with the greatest detail, ensuring affordability with a variety of options. Our upgraded state-of-the-art facilities, spacious air-conditioned chapel with live internet streaming, a modern, environmentally safe crematorium, the only of its kind on island, private viewing spaces, large on-site repast center, a modern transportation fleet. Join our burial society today and make personalized arrangements for that final moment. As you prepare to enter your loved one into eternal rest, visit or call LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and select a package that brings added comfort to the entire family. LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and Burial Society, continuing a tradition of excellence.
Welcome back, viewers. We're talking representing workers in the 21st century with Senator Andre Lewis and the President of the Public Workers Union, Mr. Brian Grimes. Andre, just before we left off, we were talking about the difficulty, really, of organizing within the small businesses that is Grenada. And I did mention my pet peeve because I feel it for the domestic workers and the store clerks who seem to be abused, quite frankly.
Yeah, and they're easily replaceable. And that's the issue. So it is not just size, because our union and other unions have membership as small as probably 8 or 10 in certain workplaces, but they're highly specialized and skilled workers, so that the employer just cannot willy-nilly get up and get rid of them. Yeah? So one has to be concerned. It is not just a matter of going out and say that we are trying to unionize our workplace. We have to be careful. Although the Constitution of Grenada allows workers to belong to a trade union of their choice, and the law allows that, and I use the Constitution as the highest law, supreme law. There's no doubt that a number of workers have suffered the sacrifice of trying to be unionized by employers dismissing them. We have had large companies that has changed ownership on the basis of trying to get rid of unions. So the smaller workplaces that you speak about, like the stores, and even domestic workers, I mean, they're quite easily replaceable. And once word gets around that they are trying to be unionized, for some reason it's found to let them go. So what we have done, and what the country has done, is to try to get better minimum conditions. But that's not all. As a matter of fact, the importance of the discussion of the minimum wage must also be seen in the context that some of the global companies, some of the larger companies that are coming into Grenada, many times call the Ministry for Labor to find out what is the minimum wage because they want to pay workers the minimum wage. And that's the importance of joining a trade union. So take Sandals, for instance. Sandals, that is not unionized, and Sandals has a history of being anti-union, and I say so with absolutely no hesitation throughout the region. We have the case of Sister Keisha, who suffered injury on the job. Yes, who the company had difficulties in paying, compensating. The matter went to court. The court ruled in her favor, and is a paltry amount. It's a lot for her, but a paltry amount for the company. And the company is refusing to pay. And obviously, they will try to use the legal system to tab the matter for as long as possible, right? Although they have accepted, based on the information that I have seen, that a portion of what the court ordered to be paid ought to be paid. The question has to do with what they call the excess. But yet still, they are not willing, have not paid that which they at the moment are not questioning, right? And there is no trade union there to represent that sister. However, there are people outside there who are interested in assistance, for instance, like lawyers, right? You have lawyers who wouldn't take any corporate case against workers, right, but would want to help that individual worker. So you have the issue of the small workplaces, the stores, as I indicate, where the nature of the work is as such that you can find replacement quite easily. You can almost take someone from off the street to work. So there is normally that high turnover. As a matter of fact, sometimes workers lose their job on the basis that the boss wake up on the wrong side of the bed in the morning and found that they were not respectful.
How does the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Union work? Because that, to me, is a pure trade union. Because, these longshoremen, and I'm giving them their official titles now, the union hall is their hub.
Yes.
They are independent contractors for the most part, just as domestic workers, but they fall under the umbrella and are represented by this trade union.
Well, that's great. As a matter of fact, Seamen embodies the history of trade union, what you call closed shop.
Right.
Years ago, not too long ago, in a number of workplaces, for anyone to come there and work, the management had to go through the union because that organized workplace, it is unionized. So Seamen embodies that which operated within the craft unions. Yes, so they have that home. They have that home. Extremely, extremely important to the country. Extremely, extremely important to the country. And they guard the interests and that of the workers very seriously. Yes, so in some workplaces in the past, as I said, we had that. I remember the time in places like telephone company and other places that you had to come through the union.
Okay. Brian, just your thoughts here now on the underrepresentation of unions. I mean, I believe that union membership has been declining worldwide. I don't know if that is the same in Grenada. And what do you believe is responsible for that overall decline in union membership?
Well, the underrepresentation of workers, that's an interesting phrase. But in the public service, I want to speak directly to the public service. We have seen some policies, right, by successive governments. For example, you have an attrition policy. So 10 workers leave, you bring in 3. So that's 7 less due-paying members for a unionized public service. What we have also seen is what I would, for lack of a better term, the damaging use of what we call contract for service. So you have people coming in the public service, and the government using coy means to employ them. So when they use those means, the workers don't get representation as far as union, and they may not have the same obligations as employer to employee. So the contract for service people, they come in, they do traditional public service jobs, but they pay the NIS for themselves. So let's say the NIS is 11%. Or 12%, as you know, as it is now. They pay all of that for themselves. A lot of the times, the lower paid workers, right, they take the option of not remitting those dues to the NIS. What happens to them in terms of long-term social security? What happens to them when they fall ill, right? And so we have seen that employers in particular, I'll speak specifically to the public service, they have utilized what I would call, you know, deficient use of engagements, you know, in terms of how they employ workers. They don't want to give them permanent work as within the scope of the Public Service Commission. And because of that...
Let me toss one back at you here. And yes, I know you've been focused on the public workers because that you're a president of that.
Yes.
But there have been observations that unions have moved away, and you raised the issue, from a flat fee to a percentage of salary. It almost means that you're a commission broker as opposed to one advocating on behalf of the workers. Because rather than taking $15 ahead, $20 ahead, if the increases as such or as the salary moves, your intake moves. Why that move, and isn't that an abuse of your...
Well, let me just say, everything has to be done in the context of economic reality for organizations and for sustainability. However, I can't speak to it deeply because currently our organization, we have a tier system whereby the highest you pay based on salary is $25 in terms of dues, then you go 20, then you go 15 for the lowest paid. Let me just say, Brother Dowe, our union is, I don't want to say it's an old school union, but we have certain principles and we are trying to advance, we are trying to modernize. But for example, we look out for our members. We have a pension judgment recently, over $75 million. Based on what you just spoke of, you would think that our organization would get back something to put in its funds, and that would not be a bad thing because we're talking about sustainability. I can say we did not ask for $1 for that monumental and historic judgment. Some might call that foolhardy. So maybe we might have to explore. Some might look at it as immoral or whatever it is. But what's about the economic reality? If there is no union, who will represent the workers at the end of the day? So it's something I don't want to comment on it too deeply because this is not a policy the Grenada Public Workers Union employs.
So maybe let's point. So
maybe I'll point it to the right.
The president of the trade union comes.
And certainly, to run an organization, to manage an organization, it requires resources. And in the Technical and Allied Workers Union, our due is structured on the same example that you use. It is a percentage of your income. And there's a minimum, and then there is whichever is greater. And if workers had to go to a lawyer to be represented.
But is that a fair comparison?
Yes, I'll come to you. Yeah. Okay, representation costs. In other words, the worth to each individual of the organization has a correlation to the income that one were to receive. If you have a flat rate and different organizations use, so we can use look at the pros and cons, right? Advantages. For someone who is who has a small salary and they're expected to pay something similar to someone who has a large salary. I mean, the question, there can be different arguments towards that. However, the central issue has to do with getting proper representation, especially in today's world, where a lot of matters are heading to the courts. The very said pension matter that Comrade Grimes spoke about were done for us, luckily, pro bono. The aspect of representation, be it SGU, be it the banks, requires the organization to find monies to pay lawyers, because the battlefield has shifted a lot, where employers have most negotiations these days to do with things as basic wage increases are no longer conducted just by irregular management personnel, but you will see the high-paying lawyers on the table, and that's their right.
Should the union therefore invest in having in-house attorneys?
Well, that's important, but we'll have to pay them in order to keep them, and that's the point. That's the point. In other words, the value of what the due that the worker pales in comparison to the protection of your job. Pales in comparison to the protection of your job. And we do not see this as commission brokering. We see this as the workers' organization. At the end of the day, the decision to have the due structure is determined by the highest decision-making body, which is the Congress or the conference. And so if, for instance, when we sought to move, because for many years, the technical and allied workers union dues was a maximum of $5. I remember doing the $5. It was $2.50, right? You couldn't, the people that worked in the secretariat were basically having difficulties in making it. Yes, to attract good representation, you want to be able to sit across the table. We have sat across the table of international lawyers, some of the better brains on the other side, and we do not feel intimidated. We have invested in our development, right? And we need to attract young people who would not have to make that decision. Boy, I want to work with Dowe, or I want to work with PW, but Cable and Wireless will pay me more. Are you following me? We have to be able to pay for the service that we require. And how do we pay? No. One have to look to move beyond union dues, because union dues by itself cannot cut it. So we have to look into other investments, real estate and other assets in issues, right? Probably the aspect of getting into, as I said, providing, we ought to get in, for instance, a typical thing, probably to help our members cope with some aspect of the cost of living, to have supermarkets. I mean, why can't we as organized labor come together and do some investment and have, let us say, 2 supermarkets, let's say one in, let us say, the northern part of the island and one in the south, where we can help manage inflation. Are you following me? Where it will not be a case of maximizing profit, but where it will be a case of bringing service to our members and operating, just meeting our operational needs and a little and above.
Let's go on meeting the obligation to members. A couple of years ago, we saw the dock salary of teachers. And
not just teachers, public officers.
Of public officers.
Yes.
And to the best of my knowledge, there wasn't a strike fund kicking in from the unions to repay the workers for the wages they would have lost as docked. Now, granted, they would have gone to court, and for my knowledge, the court case that was brought as the model was not successful. This administration decided to pay the dock salaries. But if we are to believe the courts saying that the administration was right to dock salaries, shouldn't that strike fund of the unions kick in to tie the workers by, as it were?
Well, let me put it, each organization will handle the organization that have taken that approach. The organizations that have said, look, we, from day one, we know that this is a price that we are willing to pay, right? So we are telling the employer, you can do what you want with our salary, but we know that we will win the bigger picture. But you see, it is not just what the court have said, because the aspect of political power and political influence, the social, political, and economic, and legal, yes, there's absolutely no doubt that the outcome of the last election, a significant part of that had to do with the dock salary. Right?
No, but I'm not going there because we're not talking politics. Right? So that's not where I'm going. I'm speaking of the union's responsibility to workers. We went out on strike, and in strike, our salaries were docked. Our union dues should not only be paying fancy lawyers, but I believe you have an obligation, and there ought to be a strike fund. And therefore, even not 100% of salaries, but some proportion of salaries should have been paid to the workers.
No, but the union, I can't speak for the union. They may very well have a strike fund. I mean, the Technical and Allied Workers Union do. But not every time there is a strike and workers are paid or not paid that we pay strike pay. Right? Because there are sacrifices that one must make. Now, it certainly appears that in the eyes of the unions involved, the leadership, that they were in a strong position. It may have taken, 4 years? To receive that, but it's part of the lesson of struggle, and they were able to get the incoming administration to make that payment because they struggled for years, and the politics is intertwined. The politics is intertwined. In other words, what do you want to use to advance your struggle? Sometimes at the negotiating table, you say, look, in order for us to reach that settlement, you have to pay the workers. Are you following me? So it's just different timing that is involved.
But that's when you're dealing with government. But the overall principle of dealing with an employer is, I think, important.
Well, no, there's no doubt that a court judgment has given the employers, unless this matter is overturned. That's what the law says. But many matters are settled on the streets before they reach the table. And many times, it is not a question of legality, but it is a question of finding that settlement. Yes? So different organizations will handle these matters differently. There are some unions, like the Technical and Allied Workers Union, I can tell you, as a secret to the population. Many times we go out there and from day one, we say, look guys, this thing is so important that whatever come our way, we have to make that sacrifice, right? We have had cases where we have paid strike pay more than once. And there are cases where workers have said, look, that's our commitment, that's our investment. Such is the militancy. And that is one of the things that we have to pass on to our members. Right? Because once the employer knows that your pocket will impact how much you're prepared to struggle, because their pockets are deep, they will push and they will push. So part of the education of our younger members is to build upon what Comrade Dowe and them have done. Reginald Dowe, your dad. Yes? I always hear him speak about when the British brought in the battleship, when the Grenlec Electricity Company was at Buns Point. Right? And unfortunately, a sailor died because he came on to put on the electricity and he was not trained. But these are the struggles, and we must not be afraid. Once it is a just cause, right? Even if it means losing pay for a month, for 2 weeks, for 3 days, to pursue. That is why the history of May Day that we're about to celebrate come Monday, that gave rise to the 8-hour working a day, the culmination of international struggle, when a number of workers lost their lives in Chicago, in the Haymarket, for the same 8-hour working day that we have today. Workers were jailed. Workers lost their lives.
Brian.
So what is it to lose a 2 days pay?
The militants, and what is it to lose a 2 days pay? Is that the type of resolve that you hear from your workers and from your youthful workers in particular?
Well, I wouldn't. If I have to be frank about it, we have to sort of get that basic understanding of trade unionism back within the realms of the minds of the youths within the public service. But I am with Comrade Lewis in terms of the way we look at certain things. It's not, what should I say? Struggle is not a simple thing. For example, during the pension struggle, we marched in 2018, right? The government, which was a monopoly government at that time, they decided to dock salary, right? I, as a fairly young trade unionist, I had no issue, because I know the justice sometimes takes a long time to come to reality. So when the dock salary, I received my pay slip, I laminated that, right? And when I laminated that, I was able, on a May Day, a few years after, to lift it to the members that the union represents, to say this is what struggle is about. Sometimes you lose in the short end, but you have to be persistent and you have to persevere, right? This is something that young workers have to learn within the public service. I may be an outlier because I, in principle, grew up in the trade union. Right?
And the question is, how do you communicate that to the mother of 3 and the absent father?
Well, it's a matter of education. It's a matter, they see now, there are a lot of people out there who have a negative connotation on the union and say it has outlived its usefulness. But once there is this dynamic between capital and labor, unions will always find a purpose within our society.
How do you answer proper human resource management causes or renders unions irrelevant?
How do I answer that? Well, I don't agree that unions are irrelevant or will ever be, as long as, like I stated before, that dynamic between capital and labor continues to play out and exist. Now, you will talk about a situation where a member of the union may be disadvantaged. They are mother of 3, their salary is low, so they may not go out on the streets. But I have seen within the bargaining unit, that is why there is this element called solidarity. There are those who can do it and who are willing to do it. If you're in battle, there are soldiers who will go out and will fight for the masses. So we have seen a lot of times workers go out there, other workers stay in, but they still reap the benefits. I've had instances with that in certain struggles where certain workers, you know, they get a little bit angry. They say, look, we out here, we doing all the work. We have to face the wrath of the employer. And then at the end of the day, when we reap success, those that stay inside, they also reap success. If we get it, don't give them. Don't give them anything. And I just laugh at that because solidarity is important.
Well, in your case, the negotiating team with you benefits, even though they argue with you on the increases on the public workers side, because public officers typically are the ones that are making up the government negotiating team.
Very interesting.
Respond to this to me, for me. The argument that public officers are paid for tenure and not necessarily productivity. In other words, the union increase 1%, 2%, 3%, and everybody gets it. And it matters not whether you're a productive member of the workforce or otherwise. In other words, once you manage not to die, your pay increase coming. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, well, I for one, as president of the Grenada Public Workers Union, have always advocated, because there are systems within the public service that exists for a reason, but for whatever reason, it has been pushed out. Performance appraisal, right? This is a great system in terms of evaluating workers to ensure, well, okay, this is your shortcoming, I want you to improve there. And based on your improvements, you are able to get a decent grade in order to get increments and increases. We have basically seen a technical abolition of this process within the public service, and I'm not sure why. Let me give you a next example where the union is thinking outside of the box. We have placed on the table to government, listen, you have to incentivize work within the public service. So let's say tax collectors, inland revenue workers, customs officers, give them a target. And if you give them that target and they surpass it by a certain amount, allow them to get what we may call a little bit of profit sharing. No government has grabbed onto that. So some of the shortcomings you're seeing is, one, you know, a deviation away from existing systems, and 2, you know, a lack of impetus to try different things to incentivize a modern public service.
Andre, the use of performance appraisal tools within the workforce, is that commonplace?
In some instances, yes, within our collective agreement. So I want to just step back a bit on the question that you asked, Comrade Grimes. Let's get rid of that fallacy that even if in the private sector, the employers who represent the company, the owners, they are workers themselves. Let me make the point. Right? They are workers themselves. The company belongs to the shareholders, the owners. They are highly paid employees, the managers. Many times, the salary and the movement in the salary is hinged on how little, I shouldn't say how much little, how little they can give to the worker, right? So if they can manage costs, expensive salaries, right? So when they negotiate hard to give you a measly low percentage increase, it impacts the salary increases, the bonus and salaries. And as a matter of fact, the big thing these days is to avoid paying taxes. The salaries might be at a medium level, but the allowances, right, is huge. So they avoid paying income tax and that type of thing. So it's a fallacy. Obviously, in the public service, you have that, and sometimes that combination because you have outside people involved in the negotiation. But in the private sector, they are incentivized to give you as little as possible so that their coffers can increase. And that's a fact. And you will know that when they run into difficulties. And our union and other unions have been at the forefront of championing the cause of managers who have found themselves in deep waters. And we are proud about that because they are workers themselves, right? The question of performance related. So we see salary, first of all, our objective is to maintain and improve the standard of living of our workers. I hardly hear any cry or any questions being asked when companies boast about how much profits that they have made. When companies boast about, even in a time of recession, even in a time when workers are losing their jobs, even in a time when you're asking workers to take pay cuts, that companies are performing the best and raking in millions and millions in profits. I haven't heard any cry against that. But when we fight for increases, right, it is as though all we want to get is salary increases. We say no, we want to get a better standard of living and we are willing to work. And that is where performance appraisal comes into play. Performance appraisal, we see it also like a man of the match for those who follow cricket award. So you have the basic salaries, and then you have across the board increases. And that will be influenced by cost of living, right? Because you want to keep the value of your job, because your job should be evaluated to determine.
And this is where I want to go as well. Whether or not these, well, first of all, who trains the rater? So it's a threefold question. Who trains the rater? And are these performance appraisal systems born out of a job analysis?
Okay.
And then the third aspect is there any job evaluation that is done that would determine what is the value of that job to this organization, which is what the remuneration should be paid to?
Okay, and it is something our union, I'm sure, and others have been clamoring for, right? So we just finished a job evaluation, for instance, on the international airport.
Okay.
Right? Within Grenlec, we have to do some more job evaluations, right? So we have internationally and regionally recognized bodies specialized, and we have at least one local individual, a company, right? I may not call his name, right? That is trained to do those things. We do the based on market, using benchmarking, right, etc. So yes, in a proper job evaluation, you bring the company and you decide what system you use, the HAY system, where you have scores based on entry level, education required, responsibility for monies, equipment, for people. So there's a scientific way.
Right.
And we have people trained, the Technical and Allied Workers Union have people trained in that area. Right? And I can tell you, one of the contributing factor, this thing that they speak about market forces, right? Unions play an important role in determining wages, because when you do benchmarking, you are looking to see what similar companies pay. Yes? So many managers who are not unionized and who are not represented by unions benefited from these engagements. But what we call for is to have a system that is clear, that is impartial as much as is possible, that is objective, and to have an appeals process. So, for instance, one ought not to just do a job a performance appraisal, a current performance appraisal, that a worker comes at the end of the year, the supervisor calls that person, and you sit to do a performance appraisal and say, well, you are failed here, you are good here. You ought to do that a minimum of, let us say, once every quarter or twice a year, where you have these engagements with the employee, that you point out the weaknesses, you identify what is required, and you're coaching.
Into your contracts at this particular
Some of the contracts that we have.
I know it is a best practice. The question is whether
yes, some of the contracts that we have, we would like to see much more.
Okay.
We would like to see much more, and these are the things sometimes that leads to breakdown in negotiations from the Technical and Allied Workers Union. It is not just a case of salary, but even things that will benefit the company. Right? You find probably part of the reason is that we have to relook at our management structure, some of the people at managers, right? And probably that is why we have a issue with productivity. Because if you are trained to manage, there are matrices that one can use to determine whether one is producing, because that's what you have been paid for. You're not just being paid to walk around with your hand in your pocket when the day comes because you're in a managerial position. Right? But how do you bring the resources together, the assets, the humans, right? The resources that you have to get the output that you want.
Let us speak of resources. I know GBN needs to get some now, so let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Hubbard's is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardshardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
WeatherGuard Pro. For every project, there's only one Pro.
Omega XL is a highly concentrated omega supplement in a small and easy to swallow capsule. It comes from green lipped mussels, which are sustainably grown in New Zealand, away from pollution and civilization. These mussels contain EPA, DHA, and over 30 free fatty acids that together fight pain and inflammation. Omega XL contains 22 times more free fatty acids in an easily absorbed, bioavailable form, which means one small soft gel of Omega XL has greater inflammation fighting and pain relieving power than 10 capsules of standard fish oil. This is your moment. The moment to live life at its fullest. Don't let your pain get in the way. Get back to an active life. Omega XL really works.
Don't wait to find relief from inflammation. Get Omega XL at your local pharmacy or health food store today. You have nothing to lose but your pain.
Your life is yours. Your future's in your hands. Your body is yours. That's why you need a plan. You gotta plan your family, avoid HIV, get the education from the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association.
We offer STI screening, gender-based violence counseling, prenatal and postnatal checks, injectables, condoms, pap smears, and other sexual reproductive services. Open Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The Pointu Street, St. George's. Whether male or female, it doesn't matter. We're here to make your life better.
Grenada Planned Parenthood Association.
For appointments, call 440-3341.
Boy, yo, they gonna fly with kite now. The wind picking up. I'm coming. Karim, what you doing? Fly my kite. Yeah, but not here. You can't fly kite near power lines, boy. Why not? The wind good. Because mommy say kite threads conduct electricity. Yeah, kite. It's right. If your kite gets stuck in power lines, it can cause power outages, or even worse, it can get shocked. Come, let's go and fly them in the pasture. Yeah, that makes sense.
Grenlink, energizing our Grenada.
welcome back officially, viewers, after that break. 440-1252 is our number. We are speaking, representing workers in the 21st century with Senator Andre Lewis and President of the Public Workers Union, Brian Grimes. I know Monday is May Day.
Yes.
All right, so let's just do a segment. We will invite some callers, but Monday is
sure.
Tell us the lineup.
The May Day, this celebration this year, International Workers' Day, has been celebrated under the theme promoting the goals of labor, enhancing workers' rights for security and equity. And the celebration has been held in St. Andrew. The TUC rotates the celebration every year, but obviously understanding challenges of COVID in 2020, 21, and its impact in up to 2022. We sort of celebrated in St. George, so now we are going back to St. Andrew. And we are gathering at the St. George's Grenville bus terminus, and marching from the bus terminus onto Progress Park, where the rally will be held. And at the rally, the union leaders will be addressing the rally. The Minister of Labour is expected to be there to also address the rally. And there'll be dignitaries there also. And from there, we would then move to respective areas of socializing. The different unions.
What is the purpose of May Day really? I understand its history, but really and truly, if you look at the news clips, it's Carnival, it's Juve Morning.
Well, that's true. And as a matter of fact, to be quite frank with you, it is something that we have been constantly discussing. It is something that is of concern to us. But it also falls into the changing dynamics with the generation and the aspect of education, and we need to do more of that. So, for instance, we moved to the period when we didn't have any music on the road. And you know, we are chanting, and you use the PA system, and you're chanting, and you knock bottles and spoon, etc., and your placards, and we recognized that the membership was dwindling, right? And then we went into the music, and the membership increased. And then we started to play progressive music on the road. And we had people chanting, for instance, you remember Powder? They're one of the better extemporaneans from Grenada, right? We used to have him, for instance, Dowe on the trucks. And people, the younger generation, because there are generational shifts, right, started to have difficulties. And I recall a particular year, Dowe in particular, we went and meet with our DJ, the guy who will play the music, and we identified a number of what you call progressive upbeat songs. I can never forget coming through St. David. We left Bellevue. And by the time that we reached by the police station, we recognized that the ranks started to dwindle. And people started to complain, what kind of music are you playing? And some of us were saying, well, no, that's a good music. And I remember government boots. And people are saying, well, these boots, the heels are falling off, you know what I mean? Right? And there was a particular song that we took a conscious decision not to play. Not to play. And unfortunately, the DJ that we had, he had to leave because his mom died. That same day, both of them had to leave. And the replacement DJ bowed to the pressure of the membership. And they played that song, and then the rank swelled. And when the rank swelled, and the upbeat was there, a number of macho people pulled us to the side and said, comrades, what type of music is that? So we have that issue of finding that balance, but a lot of it lies in the education of our members, right? Because remember, our membership is a reflection of our society.
Correct.
It's a reflection of, it's like West Indies cricket. You're following me? I must go there. And the workforce that we have, right, comes from our society. So yes, the concern that we have, we need to try to get more control, for want of a better word, and influence. But it's a process.
And hence I'll ask again, what is the purpose of the May Day celebration as a TUC? What do you hope to give workers? How do you hope to elevate, empower workers by having them join
the aspect of solidarity. So for instance, let us say 364 days outside of a leap year, people are in different workspaces where all unions are able to come together, all workers are able to come together, even the unemployed. Right? And that aspect of solidarity, and through the messaging and the placards, right, will speak about the challenges that we have at different workplaces. So it empowers workers by understanding that we are not into this alone, right? It speaks about the interaction of workers. There are some cases where husband and wives work at different locations. So that aspect of coming together and linking that history of celebrating May Day to celebrate the achievements that we have made over the years.
Have you gotten challenges from workers on May Day? In other words, workers that you should be representing unsatisfied with representation they've received?
Yes, they have done that, and we encourage that. It's that day that people come out and speak, but luckily for us, and most of the unions, I will believe, because of our constant engagement with our members at the workplace, they have an opportunity to raise the issues. So we have, in terms of the issue of the general councils, right? That is the second highest decision-making body. Then you have the shop steward systems and the workplace meetings. But you do find times in the labor movement when workers may not be satisfied with the way that a union has handled a matter, and they might make it known.
Okay. Anything else you want to share on May Day in particular? And viewers, of course, you're certainly welcome to join us, 440-1252. That's the number. So those of you viewing, those of you listening, you certainly can weigh in on representing workers in the 21st century.
Yeah. Well, I would just want to encourage our members, the Grenada Public Workers Union, all members, but particularly those within our bargaining union, to come out on May Day. We have a wonderful grounds that you can socialize at the Grenville Secondary School. Just come out and socialize. Going back to your question, what is the purpose of May Day? May Day is a period where there is an eclectic mix of different things that you will find in no other thing. So, for example, a carnival, it's just, about revelry. But with May Day, you have camaraderie, you have revelry, you have militancy, everything mixed with an incredible cocktail to empower the membership, right? So you have a little bit of everything. So in terms of leadership, Brother Dowe, you would understand that you can't please everybody. But May Day is a place you can, because you have some people come for the food and drink. You have some people come to hear the speeches. You have some people come to raise their placard to sort of, express themselves on a particular issue. And I think, you look at May Day in Grenada, and some people wonder what's going on. Is it being carnivalized too much? But you have to understand, while there needs to be that balance, workers are under pressure during the year. And it is that time to sort of have a catharsis to release, right, in whatever way you want to release, whether it's the placards, like I say, or whether it's, to have some laughs, some drinks with your friends, interact with people from different organizations, right? So everyone should take the opportunity to come out, and I want to encourage from all walks of life, people to come out to May Day. My comrade here said to me he's more experienced, but he said when we have the May Day in the country, normally you have more people, so we're looking forward to that in 2023.
That was very diplomatic there. I got that.
Yeah, so we're looking for the young, the old, the not so old, the in-between, everybody to come out and have a good time. I just believe it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful May Day, and we encourage our members. We have everything catered for you. We have food, we have a couple free drinks, and we have a paid bar this year because, as Brother Andrew was saying, a union has to, sustain itself. We have to get a better secretariat in terms of employees inside it to deliver service. We just have to stay alive and ensure that everything is maintained. So we have a paid bar, but we do have chits where people can get their free food and free drink, but it's not inexhaustible. Okay. So after a while you use that up, you have to pay and give back to your organization. So I'm really, really excited about 2023 May Day in St. Andrews. We have had it, I think, consecutive years in the parish of St. George, and I think people are ready to travel to the big parish to see what's happening.
This year, what's the clarion call? You can't cause the minister this year. I mean, and sometimes the minister comes under fire during Labor Day, but pensions have been paid, doc salaries returned. So what's the clarion call?
You seem to be, and I know you are probably deliberately doing that, you seem, the issue is not just about doc salary and pension, but you have, for instance, there's an outstanding negotiation that has not been completed yet with the government. There's the issue of minimum wage that has been discussed. There's the issue, the burning issue of all the issues that led to a caustic and toxic industrial relations climate from the state perspective over the past 8 years, from certainly about 2016 in a big way, 17 to 2020 to 23, is the issue of the regularization of workers, right? And let me say that it is absolutely illegal what the government and private sector is doing by giving people fixed-term contracts on a permanent basis for work of an indefinite nature. The Section 29(5) of the Labor Code, the Employment Act, addresses that, right? Sorry, of the Labor Relations Act, addresses that. Employment Act, yes.
1999?
1999. Yes, it simply says that there are 3 types of contract. Now, all workers have a contract, right? Whether written, oral, or implied. Yes? So you can have a contract for a fixed period, let's say 1 year, right? When that's done, you're done. A specific task to move 10 cases of drinks, when that's done, you're done. And a contract for an indefinite period. And it went further to say, 29(5), where the purpose, and I may not be verbatim with it, the purpose of a contract that is purportedly to do a work of a fixed term or a fixed task nature, but it is part of the ongoing concern of the business, it shall be deemed to be a contract of an indefinite nature. And that is why our current Prime Minister, Honorable Dickon Mitchell, was able to say on the political platform that the aspect of contract work is illegal. And by one stroke of the pen, workers will be made permanent because he knows there is a violation of the law. So it is absolutely illegal. And that's a major sticking issue because as you have indicated, workers who are not given a permanent contract, for want of a better word, status, have difficulties in improving the standard of living by accessing loans and other benefits, right? And we know, for the vast majority of us, to make it in this life and this society, we have to access solidarity from the financial institution, where workers' money, you guys all money, that is there. So that's a major issue. Right, and I am sure.
Did the Grenadian Union of Teachers settle that issue of the temporary and contract workers in a recent negotiation?
I can't speak to this.
Okay.
If they do, all praise and glory, and we must fight for that. Right? I haven't heard so.
Okay.
I have not heard so. I would expect that to have made big news. Right? It also happens in the private sector. It also happens in the private sector, and it is primarily done, especially in the private sector, to keep workers in check. And as a matter of fact, Brother Dowe, employers deliberately do that, recognizing that the so-called contract workers would work sometimes 2 and 3 times harder than the established worker because the supervisor will whisper in their ears, remember, your contract coming up for renewal. So it's a means of exploiting the worker, and that is why the ILO refers to it as precarious work. So it is totally illegal.
So if it is a job that is part of the ongoing business of the business, it is permanent work.
Yeah, but then you have people for 10, 15, 20 years. Right. And no one could argue, in my view, that if you're working for 3 years straight, 5 years, yes, that it is not part of the going concern. And if at some stage that you have to reorganize, then there's the aspect of redundancy. Right. So labor and the relationship between the workers and labor, and the unions have fought for that, ought to be organized. But there are times employers have the upper hand, and when they have the upper hand, they try to squeeze you. And that is why trade unions will always remain relevant. Yes, we have a number of reorganizing to do as we keep in touch with our younger members and we bring them in, and the means of communication that we use, right? And as I'm on this, let me just say, I want to use this opportunity to ask our members to be careful of the use of social media. Right. When you're applying for a job, young workers, it is not just what your application says or the interview you hold with your potential employer, but they do a background check on you. Yes? And many times you speak out information, the way you'll conduct yourself about your employer can influence your relationship. So social media have its place and its time. And please avoid being on social media during your working hours. Yes,
right.
I really, because we have that responsibility. You know, we prefer to be able to go to an employer to ask for better working conditions. As a matter of fact, we need to expand a number of the things that we have in our collective agreement. We need to bring in more social protection and social services, rather than having to go to try to save.
We're not talking about
precisely
the industrialized, but just in commercial settings as
precisely. Right? These are things that we need to address. Right, rather than having to go to try to defend a worker who has been found using their social media during the time. Give us something good to speak for. And obviously we all make errors, and if we have to beg, we do beg.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to comment on a statement you made earlier. I know it was a bit of tongue-in-cheek, referring to, well, there is nothing, in terms of Mayday, there is nothing to really make noise about, because so many good things have happened. And I would want to agree with you to a degree. This government has done an outstanding job of the payment of pension. Doc salary is important, but pension is something historic. And that is incredible and very, very commendable. And the trade union movement and the labor movement endorses this, and, you know, gives honor to that. That is good. But there is no shortage of material or issues for Mayday on Monday. Now, I want to just be, you know, just hone in on one or two little issues. So we're talking about, let's say, the morale within the public service. So yes, the government has done well here, but no organization or institution, including unions, are perfect. So we see, and we have a concern within the Grenada Public Workers Union in terms of the morale, where it seems as though intimidation tactics are being used. Let me give one example. So you have a situation where purportedly there was a leak of a document within the public service in a department, in a registry. And then you hear the cybercrime unit comes, the FIU comes, that's the Financial Investigative Unit. Where is the place for these institutions? We have, as far as I know, a functioning public service commission. So when you have a matter like this, in the grand scheme of things, and you introduce these types of bodies, you will create an aura of fear within the public service. And this administration campaign on removing the aura of victimization. I want to go back to what people may feel is a dead issue within the public service. And it occurred last year. Not long after elections, you may have noticed that the union did a press conference on some matters in Carriacou, where 5 women were terminated arbitrarily. We call it unfair dismissal. Well, at that time it was 5 of them, yes, one with a very, very odd transfer from being a caregiver to working on the farm. Ultimately, she was, you know, terminated arbitrarily. So basically, we're speaking to that. And you also used a word earlier called tokenism. So we talk about the empowerment of women. So we talk about the empowerment of women. A woman is the president of the Senate. God bless her. Very honorable woman. A woman is a labor commissioner. God bless her. She has studied, she has empowered herself, and they have gotten lofty positions within society. But the vast majority are working class. So when you treat the working class, the least among them, you cannot come back to the masses with a straight face and say, we're empowering women, when there are women out there, because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Right? So if you have this happening, and then you, on the other hand, say, well, we are empowering women, are we really being true to our policies and what we are preaching? So I say all that to say, there are things to commend, and when there are things to commend, the union will commend, but there are issues to be identified and corrected for the betterment of our society.
Thank you, Brian. Closing comments, Andrew?
Yes, we wish to encourage everyone to turn out to Mayday. Just wanted to put on record that the Grenada Trade Union Council only, I think last Thursday or Friday, received from the government through the Ministry of Social Development the invitation for us to nominate our labor representative on the National Insurance Scheme Investment Committee, a matter that we have championed, and that matter is now resolved because we have made our submission. All these will lend to a more simmer down and temper down May activities, although there are issues to be addressed. And I can't help but recognize, as Comrade Grimes spoke about women and in leadership positions, think about the dismissal of the labor commissioner, the female, right, a woman who came with the highest levels of commendation, right? And I've heard many people ask whether or not, had it been a male, would that have happened? I don't have an answer to this, right? But all these will lend itself to, if at this senior level, right, these dismissals can take place the way it has done, what is the junior public officer to expect? And as we head into May Day, the battles that we have fought over the years and continue to fight, and as much as we have made progress, we have made serious progress, right? Today, unfortunately, people tend to judge whether you have a car or you have television in your house as signs of progress. Yes, you have made that. But the aspect of wanting to improve your standard of living, because as you have made that, or access to education, or access to health and safety, are ideals that we need to keep fighting for and pursuing. So we encourage everyone to come out to May Day celebrations this year, and we give our commitment in the labor movement to continue pursuing the interests of the working class people and the interests of Grenada as a whole. We have always made sacrifices and will continue to make sacrifice, but it must be meaningful and it must be across the board. And to our young members, we give that commitment that we have to continue to reach out to you as we seek to better your living conditions. And minimum wage, I am very happy that the chairman and chairperson of the Minimum Wage Committee has adopted that theme, which says it is not just minimum wage, but it is a living wage. As a matter of fact, the aspect of minimum wage came out of the aspect of what is a minimum living wage. What is a living wage? And the living wage ought to be able to address, to ensure that there are certain basic necessities, that your salary, the value of your job, not your productivity, the value of your job can get. Right? And obviously management have to manage to ensure that workers perform. And we are here and willing to give our assistance. But when you make it difficult for us by doing all sorts of activities that will call for our engagement on matters that can be avoided, it gives us less time to address these matters that management would want us to address.
Senator Andrew Lewis, thank you so very much. President Brian Grimes, it absolutely was a pleasure chatting with you on how representation of workers in the 21st century would look like. And to you viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us on this day, 24th of April edition of Beyond the Headlines. 6 days, 22.5 hours. Have yourselves a wonderful evening.